A millionaire brings a homeless woman to his ex-fiancée's wedding, and her bold move stunned everyone. Welcome to our inspiring journey of rebuilding life. In this video, we dive into the powerful process of overcoming challenges and transforming your life for the better. If you find this story inspiring, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel Stories TH for more motivational content. A millionaire's unexpected choice. Finding love in the most unlikely place. William Lancaster, a successful and affluent businessman, had everything one could wish for: wealth, power, status, and a life many would envy. But when he received an invitation to the wedding of his ex-fiancée, Olivia, it was like a reminder of all that had been lost. The invitation came without an explanation, just a simple card that, to him, felt like a jab. Olivia, the woman he had once planned to spend his life with, had moved on without him, and now she was getting married to someone else. To William, it felt like a cruel joke. As he sat in his spacious office, staring at the invitation, he muttered to himself, "Is this supposed to be a joke?" He tossed the envelope aside, but his friend and confidant, Damon Carter, picked it up and gave a low whistle. "That's a low blow, man," Damon said, glancing at his friend, whose jaw was tight with barely contained frustration. "Are you going to show up alone, though?" Looking like a failure, William let out a dry laugh. "No way. I need to make an impression." But what kind of impression could he make at his ex's wedding? He needed to show Olivia that he was unaffected, that he had moved on, that he was more successful than ever. But simply going alone wouldn't cut it. He needed something more, something that would make Olivia feel that she had lost out. As he left his office that day, the thoughts of the wedding invitation weighed heavily on his mind. It was then that he saw her sitting on the curb in front of a restaurant. She was a young woman, worn and weathered by life, her clothes ragged and her hair messy. But there was something captivating about her. Her defiant eyes met his, unyielding and sharp. She wasn't begging for help, nor was she pleading for pity. There was something in the way she looked at him, something that intrigued him more than he cared to admit. Without a second thought, William approached her, hands in his pockets. "Hey, you need money?" he asked. The woman looked up, sizing him up with a level of scrutiny that startled him. "Is this a social experiment? You ask, and depending on my answer, you either toss me a coin or walk away." William's eyebrows lifted in surprise. No one had ever spoken to him like that. "I wasn't planning on walking away," he said, his voice cool, but with an undercurrent of curiosity. "Come with me to an event, and I'll pay you enough to change your life." She didn't seem impressed. Instead, she chuckled lightly and shook her head. "Enough to change my life? Wow. Do you always use dramatic lines? Or is this just when you want to sound like some kind of savior?" There was an edge to her words that caught him off guard. He wasn't used to being challenged like this. "I'm serious. I need someone to attend a social event with me," he insisted, his voice firm. The woman tilted her head, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Oh, I see. You wanted to be your decorative doll for the night." Her words stung more than he expected. He pressed his lips together, trying to stay calm. "You don't want the offer? Fine. I'll find someone else." She laughed out loud this time. "This is a joke, right? Do you see a line of candidates waiting around here?" William had never been so disarmed by anyone in his life. But he stood his ground. "I'm offering you a chance. You can take it or leave it." The woman stood up, dusting herself off, her eyes never leaving his. "I'll accept," she said coolly, "but only because I'm curious." William was taken aback. Curious about what? He had no idea, but there was something in her gaze that unnerved him. "Curious about what?" he asked. She smiled, a mysterious glint in her eyes. "Curious to see how far a man like you is willing to go." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. William had never expected this woman, this stranger, to have such an impact on him. She didn't ask questions, didn't seem intimidated by the world he occupied. In fact, she moved through the evening with an effortless grace, leaving everyone, especially Olivia, wondering who she was. When they arrived at the venue, the grand ballroom was filled with society's elite. It was a wedding, of course, and Olivia stood at the center, radiant in her wedding gown, surrounded by her friends and family. But William, for the first time, didn't see Olivia. He saw the woman beside him, Isabella. She had transformed in the most remarkable way. Her hair, once tangled and unkempt, now flowed in smooth waves. Her face, once marked by exhaustion, was now flawless, her makeup perfect. The dress she wore accentuated her figure, and yet she didn't seem to care about the attention she was attracting. As she walked beside him, her eyes met the curious stares of the other guests, but she didn't flinch. She smiled politely, but it was the kind of smile that made everyone wonder who she was and why she was with William. As they entered the ballroom, Olivia's eyes locked with William's. Surprise flickered in her expression for a brief moment before it was replaced with something more calculating. But when her gaze landed on Isabella, her expression shifted, and William could see the discomfort she was trying to hide. Isabella, on the other hand, remained composed. Her confidence was undeniable, and she didn't flinch or shy away from the attention. She stood beside William, her poise graceful, as if she were born for this world. "Olivia," William greeted, his voice polite but cool. "What a surprise. Of course I came." He glanced at Isabella. "And I brought company." Isabella extended her hand to Olivia, offering a polite smile. "Isabella, a pleasure to meet you," she said, her voice firm but not overbearing. The tension was palpable. Olivia examined Isabella from head to toe, her discomfort evident. "We haven't been introduced," Olivia said, her voice cool. "You look familiar," she added, clearly trying to figure out who this mysterious woman was. Isabella merely smiled, a soft, enigmatic smile. "Do I? Shall we toast?" Charles Montrose, Olivia's new husband, interrupted, trying to break the tension. He raised his glass, and the awkward atmosphere lingered for only a moment longer. The evening unfolded with Isabella surprising everyone. Her sharp mind, her intelligence, and her effortless ability to navigate through high society left a lasting impression on the guests. She wasn't just a decorative doll, as William had expected. She was a force to be reckoned with, and it made him question everything he thought he knew about her. As the night wore on, William found himself more and more intrigued by her. She wasn't just a homeless woman who had accepted his offer. She was someone with a story, someone with a past that she wasn't ready to share. But what William didn't know was that Isabella's past was far more complicated than he could have imagined. And soon, he would learn just how deep that mystery went. Isabella, too, was playing her own game. She wasn't just there to make Olivia jealous. She had a purpose. She knew more about the world William inhabited than she let on. And as the night came to a close, she found herself questioning whether she could keep this facade going or if the truth would eventually catch up with her. By the time the night was over, Isabella had made her mark. But little did she know, the game was only just beginning. The truth would soon come to light, and it would change everything for both her and William. A Millionaire's unlikely romance. From mistake to destiny, Ethan Pfizer, a young and successful CEO, had always been focused on one thing: his career. His empire was growing, his influence expanding, and yet, love never seemed to find its way into his life. His days were filled with meetings, deadlines, and strategic decisions. But as he sat in his sleek office overlooking the city, something felt missing. He had everything he could ever want except for someone to share it with. One fateful morning, he was forced to face a decision that would alter the course of his life. It began like any other day, a rush of emails, a series of phone calls, and the usual pressure of a business that was constantly on the move. As the clock ticked closer to noon, he glanced at his schedule. His assistant had set up a meeting with the company's newest intern, a young woman named Elisa Martin. She had a reputation for being a bit chaotic, but what intrigued Ethan more was that she came highly recommended by his colleagues. Elisa was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. The moment she walked into the conference room, she exuded an energy that seemed to crackle in the air. Her wide smile and casual demeanor were a stark contrast to the rigid corporate world that Ethan was used to. She was wearing a bright, patterned dress that looked completely out of place in the stuffy office environment, and her hair was messy, as though she had rushed to the meeting in a hurry. Ethan couldn't help but notice her disarming confidence as she walked towards him. "Mr. Pfizer, it's so nice to meet you," she said, extending her hand with genuine enthusiasm. I've heard a lot about you. Ethan, for the first time in a long time, felt slightly out of his element. He had never met anyone quite like her. He shook her hand, suppressing a smirk. Elisa, right? It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm curious to see what you can bring to the team. Elisa sat down across from him, casually crossing her legs. I'm all about creative ideas and getting things done in unconventional ways, she said with a wink. I hope that's okay with you. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Unconventional, he asked, intrigued by her boldness. We usually stick to a pretty strict routine around here. Elisa grinned. Well, I believe that breaking the rules is how you make progress. Don't worry, I'll be able to adapt. She leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. I just have a few ideas that could take the company to the next level. Ethan was silent for a moment, studying her. She didn't have the formal air of the other interns. In fact, she seemed like she didn't even care to fit into the corporate mold. That was part of her charm, and it unnerved Ethan in a way he wasn't used to. The conversation moved on to the details of her internship, and she seemed perfectly capable. She spoke with such confidence about her ideas and projects that Ethan couldn't help but be impressed. Despite her unorthodox appearance and approach, there was something about her that caught his attention. As the meeting ended, Ethan felt a flicker of something unusual. He couldn't quite place it. Was it curiosity? Intrigue? Or was it simply the fact that Elisa was so unlike anyone he had ever encountered before? Later that afternoon, the chaos of the office resumed, but Ethan's mind kept returning to Elisa. She was certainly different. Her personality was as colorful as her wardrobe, and that boldness was something Ethan hadn't expected. As the days passed, he found himself thinking about her more often than he cared to admit. He even found himself waiting for her in the hallways, hoping to catch a glimpse of her as she walked by, her head held high, her vibrant smile lighting up the office. One afternoon, he found himself walking through the office lobby when he saw Elisa engaged in an animated conversation with one of the junior staff members. She was laughing, her head thrown back, and it was clear that everyone around her was captivated by her energy. Ethan, however, stood frozen in place, watching her. Without realizing it, he had started to care. She was effortlessly charming, and there was something refreshing about the way she interacted with everyone. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply being herself. That was something Ethan couldn't help but respect. As the days went by, Ethan's feelings for Elisa grew. It wasn't just her carefree attitude that intrigued him. It was her ability to shake him out of his rigid, business-first mindset. She was the kind of person who didn't worry about the small things. While Ethan obsessed over every detail of his business, Elisa seemed to glide through life, enjoying each moment. And that thought both irritated and fascinated him. One night, after an exhausting day at the office, Ethan found himself at a company mixer. It was the usual affair: drinks, small talk, and handshakes. He wasn't in the mood to mingle, but attended because it was expected of him. As he stood in the corner of the room, he spotted Elisa across the room, laughing with a group of colleagues. She was holding a glass of wine, her hair loose and flowing, her bright red dress making her stand out among the sea of dark suits and ties. Her laughter rang through the room, and Ethan found himself watching her once again. There was something magnetic about her. She didn't care about fitting into the corporate world. She was creating her own space within it. At that moment, their eyes met. For a fleeting second, it felt like the world had stopped. She smiled at him, a playful, mischievous grin that seemed to dare him to come over and talk to her. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then made his way toward her. "Having fun?" he asked, his voice quiet, but there was an edge to it. Elisa looked at him, her eyes twinkling. "Of course. I mean, it's a mixer, right? You're supposed to have fun at these things, not just stand in the corner looking miserable." Ethan chuckled, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through him. "I wasn't looking miserable," he said, though he knew he had been. "Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" she asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged, not sure if he should admit how often his thoughts had been preoccupied with her lately. "About life. About work. About everything, really." "Well, you should stop thinking so much," Elisa said with a grin. Sometimes the best things in life happen when you stop overthinking and just go with the flow. Ethan shook his head, amazed at her ability to speak so freely, so confidently. I think I need a little more structure in my life. Elisa raised an eyebrow. Structure? Huh? Well, you might be right, but a little bit of chaos could be a good thing too. Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering her words. There was something in her demeanor, something that made him feel like he could be himself around her. He didn't have to act like the CEO of a major company when he was with her. He could just be Ethan. After a long pause, Ethan finally spoke. Maybe you're right. I think I could use a little more chaos in my life. Elisa grinned. Well, I'm here to help you with that. From that moment on, Ethan and Elisa's connection deepened. What started as simple intrigue grew into something more. They spent more time together, talking about everything and nothing at all. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and yet, Ethan resisted the pull. He was still a CEO. He couldn't afford to get involved with someone who might disrupt his carefully crafted life. But as the weeks passed, Ethan found himself constantly drawn to Elisa. She didn't just bring chaos. She brought joy, freedom, and a fresh perspective on life. He started to see the world differently, and for the first time, he wondered if there was more to life than business deals and profit margins. Then one evening, everything changed. Elisa invited Ethan to dinner, and for the first time, he decided to let go of his reservations. The night was filled with laughter, good food, and conversation. When they finished dinner, Elisa turned to him, her expression more serious than usual. Ethan, she said softly, I think it's time for us to stop pretending that we're just colleagues. I know there's something more between us. Ethan's heart raced. He had been avoiding the truth, but in that moment, he knew she was right. I think I've been avoiding it too, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Elisa smiled, a genuine, soft smile that melted something inside him. So what now? What do you want? Ethan asked, his eyes searching hers. Elisa's smile widened. I want this. I want you. No more games. No more pretending. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. Then it settled, he said, his voice steady. Let's stop pretending. And with that, their lives changed forever. No longer was Ethan the reserved CEO who focused solely on his career. With Elisa by his side, he learned that there was more to life than success. There was love, joy, and the unpredictable chaos of finding someone who could make your world a little bit brighter. In the end, Ethan Pfizer realized that the best things in life are often the ones you never saw coming, and sometimes love shows up when you least expect it. A Millionaire CEO's unlikely romance. A journey of growth and love. It was a Monday morning when William Lancaster, a Millionaire CEO of one of the most successful tech firms in the country, sat behind his polished mahogany desk, looking over financial reports and market trends. To the outside world, William had it all: money, power, and influence. But despite all his wealth and status, there was something missing. He had never truly experienced love, and he was beginning to wonder if he ever would. His company, Lancaster Technologies, was thriving, but William's personal life had always taken a back seat. He had spent years focused on building his empire, but at 35, he was starting to feel the weight of loneliness. He had dated, of course, but his relationships had always been short-lived. Women in his social circle were drawn to his wealth and influence, but none had ever managed to capture his heart. For years, he had buried himself in work, convincing himself that love wasn't worth the effort. That was until Elisa Martin entered his life. Elisa was an intern at Lancaster Technologies, and her first day in the office was anything but typical. William had been in a meeting when he first noticed her. She was sitting at the back of the room, notepad in hand, nodding attentively as everyone else seemed preoccupied with their phones or laptops. She was different from the others, a little messy, a little unpolished, yet confident and present. William couldn't help but be intrigued by her. He had seen interns come and go, but Elisa had a spark about her that was hard to ignore. There was something magnetic in her gaze, a quiet determination mixed with a sense of rebellion. She wasn't like the other young professionals he was used to seeing in the office. The more he observed her, the more he realized that she wasn't just there to do her job. She was there to make an impact. Her energy was contagious, and it wasn't long before William found himself wanting to know more about her. Elisa had her quirks, of course. She often challenged the norm, and she didn't always follow the company rules. But that was part of her charm. Where other employees hesitated, she dove right in, asking questions and offering suggestions that were often unconventional, yet brilliant. William found himself increasingly fascinated by her, especially as she began to bring a new perspective to the company. One day, while they were working late together, William noticed that Elisa was putting in extra hours, just like him. She was seated at her desk, surrounded by piles of paperwork and reports, her eyes glued to the screen. William walked over to her, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. "You're still here?" he asked, leaning against her desk. Elisa looked up, surprised to see him. "Well, someone has to get this done," she replied with a grin. "And you're not exactly setting the best example by leaving the office so early, are you?" William raised an eyebrow, amused. "Touché," he said. "You know, for someone who's supposed to be an intern, you're putting in more work than most of the full-time staff." Elisa shrugged. "I guess I'm just trying to prove that I can handle it. I'm not here to just watch the clock." William was silent for a moment, studying her. There was something in the way she spoke, in the way she carried herself, that made him admire her. She wasn't like the others who followed the rules to the letter. She was ambitious, driven, and refreshingly unapologetic about it. "I like that," he said finally. "You don't wait for permission. You just do it." Elisa smiled, her eyes lighting up. "Isn't that how things get done? You can't sit around waiting for the perfect moment to act." The conversation shifted, and before William knew it, hours had passed. They were no longer discussing work, but rather their personal lives. Elisa revealed that she had grown up in a small town and had worked her way up through countless odd jobs to get to where she was. She wasn't born into wealth, and she didn't care about it either. She just wanted to prove that she could make something of herself, no matter her circumstances. William found himself drawn to her honesty and her authenticity. She was nothing like the women he had known in his past relationships, those who were always looking for a piece of his fortune. Elisa, on the other hand, didn't care about his wealth or status. She was more interested in his mind, his ambitions, and what drove him. As the days went on, their connection deepened. They spent more time together, both professionally and personally. William started to realize that he enjoyed her company more than he had expected. She made him laugh, she challenged him to think outside the box, and most of all, she made him feel alive in a way he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't long before William found himself thinking about Elisa, even when they weren't together. He looked forward to their late-night work sessions, to their conversations about everything and nothing, and to the way she made him feel like he wasn't just the CEO of a major corporation, but a real person with emotions and desires. Elisa, for her part, had begun to notice the shift in William as well. He was no longer the cold, calculating CEO she had first met. Over time, she had seen him soften, relax, and even show a little vulnerability. She admired his drive and ambition, but what really drew her to him was the way he really listened when she spoke. He didn't dismiss her ideas or brush her off. Instead, he encouraged her and treated her as an equal. In a world where power and status were everything, that was a rare quality to find. One evening, as they were leaving the office together, William couldn't help but feel the pull between them. They had spent the entire day working on a new project, and it had gone exceptionally well. But as they stood by the elevator, there was a moment of silence, a quiet tension between them. "You know, I've been thinking," William said, breaking the silence. "You've really changed the way I look at things." Elisa turned to him, surprised. "Really? How?" "You've shown me that there's more to life than just business. More to living than just climbing the corporate ladder." Elisa smiled, a little amused. "I didn't think I was that profound." William laughed. "You're more profound than you think." There was a moment of silence before Elisa spoke again, her voice a little softer than usual. "I'm glad to hear that, because honestly, I never thought I'd get this close to a CEO, let alone one like you." William's heart skipped a beat. The way she said it, the sincerity in her voice, it struck a chord in him. He stepped closer to her, the distance between them narrowing. "And what about us?" he asked, his voice low. "Where does that leave us?" Elisa looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think we should find out." In that moment, something shifted between them. The tension that had been building over the past few weeks finally came to a head. William knew that he couldn't ignore his feelings any longer. Elisa had become a constant presence in his life, and he realized that he wanted more than just friendship with her. As the weeks passed, their relationship blossomed. What started as a professional connection had turned into something deeper, something real. They spent more time together, and their chemistry became undeniable. But the road wasn't always easy. William's career was demanding, and Elisa had her own goals and aspirations. Yet, despite the challenges they faced, they found a way to make it work. Their journey was filled with moments of doubt and uncertainty, but also with growth, love, and mutual respect. William had always thought that success was the only thing that mattered, but Elisa had taught him that love and connection were just as important. And for the first time in his life, he was willing to take a chance on something other than business. As for Elisa, she had always believed in the importance of independence and self-sufficiency. But through her relationship with William, she learned that it was okay to lean on someone, to trust someone completely. Together, they discovered a new kind of partnership, one based on mutual respect, love, and support. In the end, William Lancaster realized that true success wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about finding someone who could make you a better person, someone who could challenge you, support you, and love you unconditionally. And in Elisa, he found that person. A millionaire CEO's unexpected journey of love and redemption. William Lancaster was a man of ambition, drive, and power. As the CEO of one of the most successful technology companies in the nation, he had it all: wealth, prestige, and influence. Yet despite his accomplishments, there was always an unfilled void in his heart. He had been married once before, but his wife had left him for another man. Since then, William had built walls around himself, convincing himself that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. At 40, William had made peace with his solitary existence, focusing solely on the business empire he had worked so hard to create. His days were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and acquisitions. He was known for his no-nonsense attitude, unwavering focus, and his ability to control every aspect of his business. But the moment his ex-wife, Olivia, reached out and invited him to her upcoming wedding, everything began to change. Olivia's sudden invitation struck William with a sense of disbelief. She had left him without explanation, and now, years later, she was inviting him to witness her marry someone else. What was the meaning of this? Was she trying to make him feel like a failure, rubbing her happiness in his face? It felt like a cruel joke, but William had a deep need to regain control over the situation. He knew he couldn't show up alone, with no one by his side. The invitation was a stark reminder of everything he had lost, and he needed to send a message that he had moved on. But to do that, he needed the perfect companion, someone who would leave an impression on Olivia. That evening, as William was leaving his office, he noticed a woman sitting on the sidewalk near a restaurant. She looked out of place. Her clothes were worn, and her hair unkempt. But there was something about her, a quiet defiance in her eyes, that caught William's attention. It wasn't the typical homeless person you'd see on the streets. This woman didn't beg, didn't look desperate. Instead, she looked like someone who had seen hardship but still stood her ground. William approached her, offering money, but she wasn't interested in a simple handout. Instead of accepting his offer, she stared at him with an almost mocking gaze. "Is this some kind of social experiment?" she asked. "Are you offering me money just to walk away, or are you trying to make yourself feel better about it?" William, intrigued by her boldness, found himself unable to look away. It wasn't the typical reaction he was used to. Women who had encountered him in the past would either have shown gratitude or asked for more. But this woman, this stranger, seemed completely indifferent to his wealth, and that intrigued him more than anything. "Come with me to a wedding," he proposed, wanting to see how far he could push the situation. "I'll pay you enough to change your life." Her response was a quiet chuckle, filled with sarcasm. Enough to change my life? Is this a line you use often? Or just when you're trying to sound like a savior? She raised an eyebrow at him, and the words stung in a way William wasn't accustomed to. His usual charm didn't seem to work on her, and that intrigued him further. William, momentarily taken aback, pressed on. You just need to dress up, smile, and attend a wedding with me. I'll make sure you're compensated. Elisa, as she later introduced herself, accepted his offer, but only because she was curious to see how far someone like him was willing to go. This wasn't a woman who would play by his rules. She wasn't intimidated by his wealth, and she wasn't afraid of making him uncomfortable. And in a strange way, William found that exhilarating. As they arrived at a renowned beauty salon, William had Elisa transformed. The stylist took hours to redo her hair, apply makeup, and dress her in an elegant gown that fit her body like a glove. But even after the transformation, she didn't seem fazed. The woman who had once looked out of place on the sidewalk was now poised, confident, and looked completely at ease in the lavish surroundings. William was impressed, but there was something unsettling about Elisa's calmness. It was as though she had been part of this world all along. He had assumed she was just another girl from the streets who had been given a second chance. But Elisa proved to be something far more complex. Arriving at the wedding, all eyes were on them. William, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, looked like he belonged in this world. But as Elisa walked by his side, heads turned, whispers spread, and she commanded the attention of everyone in the room. She wasn't dazzled by the luxury of the venue. In fact, she seemed to take everything in with a cool detachment that made her stand out even more. As they entered the ballroom, William couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. Olivia, his ex-wife, was standing by the bar with her fiancé. The moment their eyes met, Olivia's face turned cold, and William knew that she had seen right through his game. She was not happy to see him there, but when she noticed Elisa beside him, her expression shifted now. She was caught off guard, clearly uncomfortable. William knew he had made an impact, but Elisa didn't stop there. She spoke her mind in a way that made everyone pause. Marriage is a serious commitment, she said, addressing Olivia with a calm smile. I was once engaged, but it didn't work out. My fiancé didn't think I was the right choice for his family. The room went silent. Olivia's face flushed with a mix of discomfort and realization. Elisa's words had struck a chord, and William couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at seeing his ex-wife uneasy. But Elisa wasn't done. As they danced later, Elisa led the conversation, clearly enjoying every moment of making Olivia feel unsettled. William couldn't help but admire the way Elisa played the game, how she knew exactly what to say to get under Olivia's skin without even trying. Despite William's initial plan to make Olivia jealous, he found himself becoming increasingly fascinated by Elisa. She wasn't just the beautiful, mysterious woman he had taken to the wedding to provoke his ex-wife. There was a depth to her, an unspoken strength that caught him off guard. As they spent more time together, William started to realize that his attraction to Elisa was more than just a game. Elisa's past wasn't what it seemed, though. She was no stranger to hardship, but there was a lot more to her than met the eye. She had once been part of the high society world before a tragic betrayal tore her life apart. Her father, Richard Deo, was a successful business tycoon, but when Olivia's family got involved with his company, things took a dark turn. Olivia had been the one to manipulate the situation, leading to the downfall of Elisa's family. Her father lost everything, and Elisa was left with nothing. She had erased her past and disappeared from the social scene, choosing to survive on the streets. Now, she was back, and she wasn't going to let anyone stand in her way, especially Olivia. With William's help, Elisa was determined to reclaim her life. As their partnership deepened, so did their relationship. They started working together, and William quickly realized that he wasn't just helping her rebuild her empire, he was falling in love with her. However, the threat from Olivia was far from over. Olivia, desperate to maintain control, began trying to sabotage Elisa's efforts. But Elisa was determined. With William by her side, she knew that they could take down Olivia once and for all. Together, They uncovered the truth about Olivia's fraudulent schemes, exposing her to the world. Olivia's empire collapsed, and she was arrested for her crimes. But Elisa's victory wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming her own life, her independence, and her future. And William, who had once been the arrogant CEO obsessed with his empire, realized that his future was now tied to hers. As they grew closer, William knew he had to make Elisa his. He loved her more than he had ever loved anyone before. And when the time came, he proposed to her not just because of the history they had together, but because he wanted to build a future with her. And Elisa, the woman who had once been broken by betrayal and loss, found herself accepting his love and the life they would build together. Their journey was one of growth, redemption, and love. It was about two people finding strength in each other and learning that true power didn't come from wealth or status, but from love and loyalty. Together, they would face whatever challenges life had in store, knowing that as long as they were together, they could overcome anything. A millionaire CEO and the unexpected power of love, William Lancaster had it all. A towering figure in the business world, William was the kind of CEO who commanded attention without speaking a word. As the head of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, he was a man who built his success on sharp intellect, relentless drive, and the ability to control every aspect of his world. He lived in a lavish penthouse, drove expensive cars, and dined in the finest restaurants. But despite all the luxury and wealth, there was one thing that William had never been able to master: love. His marriage had ended in tragedy, leaving him bitter and closed off. His ex-wife, Olivia, had left him for another man, and since then, William had built a wall around himself. He buried himself in his work, avoiding anything that might remind him of the pain of rejection. But everything changed the moment he received an unexpected invitation, a wedding invitation from none other than Olivia herself. The invite was a slap in the face. Olivia, the woman who had broken his heart, was getting married, and she wanted him to attend. Was this a cruel joke, an attempt to rub her happiness in his face? William couldn't understand why she would invite him, knowing how much she had hurt him. Yet, he knew he couldn't ignore the invitation. He had to go, but he couldn't go alone. No, he had to show up with someone who would make Olivia feel a sense of regret, someone who would show her that he had moved on. He needed someone who could leave an impression, and that's when he found her. On the way to the event, William noticed a young woman sitting on the sidewalk, a woman who appeared out of place in the busy city. Her clothes were worn and her hair messy, but there was something about her, a quiet confidence, a strength in her posture that made William stop in his tracks. She wasn't asking for money. Instead, she looked up at him with a mixture of defiance and curiosity, as if deciding whether he was worth her attention. "Hey, you need money?" William asked, his voice laced with the same arrogance that had served him well in the business world. The woman didn't look grateful. Instead, she gave him a sarcastic smile. "What's this, a social experiment? You offer me money, and depending on my answer, you either throw me a coin or walk away." William's eyebrows arched in surprise. No one spoke to him like this. He was used to people either bowing down to his power or treating him with exaggerated politeness. But this woman, she was different. Her calm demeanor and sharp wit intrigued him, and before he knew it, he found himself offering her something far more than money. "How would you like to attend a fancy event with me? I'll pay you enough to change your life," he said, half joking but completely serious. To his surprise, she didn't flinch or react with disbelief. She simply smiled, a smirk that made William realize this was no ordinary woman. "Wow, so dramatic. Enough to change my life? Really? I don't have time for games," he replied, trying to maintain his composure, but she didn't back down. She tilted her head, a challenge in her eyes. "Fine, but I'm doing this because I'm curious. Let's see how far someone like you is willing to go." William didn't know why, but her words struck a chord. He couldn't figure her out, but he wanted to. He knew she was his ticket to making Olivia regret ever walking away. But as they walked through the streets to the event, something shifted. This wasn't just a woman he could manipulate for his own gain. This was someone who stood her ground, someone who didn't bend to the will of the world around her. Elisa, as she introduced herself, wasn't impressed by the lavish salon where William took her. She wasn't awed by the makeup artists or the stylist that fussed over her hair. In fact, she seemed more amused than anything. She looked at herself in the mirror with a kind of quiet dignity that made William question his original plans. He had thought he was offering her a new life, but she had a life of her own, a life that was far more complex than he could ever have imagined. When she walked into the wedding, it was clear that she was a force to be reckoned with. People turned their heads as she entered, their gazes lingering on her in admiration and curiosity. William, by her side, had to admit that this wasn't just a power play for his benefit. Elisa wasn't just showing up to make Olivia jealous. She was showing up to show the world that she belonged. William's ex-wife, Olivia, froze when she saw them. Her gaze flicked between William and Elisa, confusion written all over her face. This wasn't the woman William had married, and Olivia couldn't hide her discomfort. William, for once, felt a strange satisfaction as he saw Olivia shift uncomfortably in her place. But Elisa wasn't finished. With a casual grace, she turned the tables, speaking with deliberate calmness. "Marriage is a serious commitment," she said, looking directly at Olivia. "I was once engaged myself, but it didn't work out. My fiancé didn't think I was the right choice for his family." The words were sharp, cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. Olivia's eyes narrowed, her expression faltering for just a second. William couldn't help but smile inwardly. Elisa wasn't just a pawn in his game, she was a player in her own right, and she knew exactly how to take control of the situation. As the evening wore on, William found himself growing more and more intrigued by Elisa. She wasn't just beautiful, and she wasn't just an enigma. There was a depth to her, something he hadn't expected. She was sharp, confident, and unafraid to speak her mind. She wasn't afraid to challenge him either, and that only made him more attracted to her. Elisa's past wasn't as simple as it seemed. She didn't just come from the streets. She had been born into a wealthy family, but one that had been torn apart by betrayal. Her father had once been a prominent businessman, but a devastating scandal involving embezzlement had brought his empire crashing down. Olivia had played a key role in destroying Elisa's family, manipulating the situation to make sure that Elisa's father was blamed for crimes he hadn't committed. Elisa, who had been a part of high society, was forced to disappear. She erased all traces of her existence, leaving behind the life she had once known. But now, with William's help, she was ready to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Together, they devised a plan to expose Olivia for the manipulative person she truly was. As their plan unfolded, so did their relationship. William began to see Elisa in a new light, not as a woman he had brought to a wedding to get revenge, but as someone he could trust and even love. But the journey wasn't easy. Olivia, desperate to protect herself, began using every resource she had to destroy Elisa. In the end, it was Elisa's strength and resilience that won the day. With William by her side, she was able to take Olivia down. The evidence was undeniable, and Olivia was arrested for her involvement in the scandal that had ruined Elisa's family. William, for the first time in years, felt a sense of satisfaction. He wasn't just avenging his past. He was standing by the side of a woman who had fought for everything she had and won. But the victory wasn't just about revenge. It was about something deeper. It was about Elisa reclaiming her life and her independence. It was about William finally understanding that love wasn't just about control or power. It was about vulnerability, trust, and finding someone who could make you better. As the story came to a close, William realized that he had finally found the one person who could change his life for the better. Elisa, the woman who had once been a stranger, was now the love of his life. And together, they would build a future, a family, and a life free from the shadows of their pasts. The Millionaire CEO's unexpected path to love, a journey of redemption. William Lancaster had spent his life in the fast lane. As the CEO of a successful tech company, he had all the material wealth anyone could dream of. His life was filled with private jets, designer suits, and a penthouse in the heart of the city. Yet, despite all the luxury, William felt a profound emptiness. His heart had been broken years ago when his fiancée, Olivia, had left him for someone else. Since then, William had closed himself off, burying his pain beneath layers of business deals and boardroom meetings. But all that changed one evening when William received an invitation he had never expected. It was from Olivia, his ex-fiancée. She was getting married, and she wanted him to attend. William could feel the sting immediately. After all these years, Olivia, the woman who had torn his heart apart, was getting married to someone else, and she wanted him to witness it. It was as if the universe had thrown him a challenge, to show up at her wedding with someone more successful, more stunning, more desirable, someone who would make Olivia regret leaving him. But William had no interest in getting into a petty rivalry. He was a man of power and control, and he would not let Olivia have that satisfaction. But deep down, the thought of walking into that room alone, a reminder of his past failure, was too much to bear. So, he decided to bring someone with him. He needed to prove that he had moved on, that he was better than the man Olivia had left behind. However, he didn't just want someone, he needed someone who would make a real impact. As he left his office later that day, his mind still spinning with thoughts of the wedding, he saw her. A young woman sat on the sidewalk outside a restaurant. She looked out of place, dressed in tattered clothes with messy hair, her face a little too sharp for someone who appeared to be down on their luck. But there was something about her, an unspoken strength, that immediately caught William's attention. She wasn't begging for money or sympathy. She simply looked at him with an air of defiance. "Hey, you need money?" William asked, his voice devoid of the usual authority. She didn't even acknowledge his question with gratitude. Instead, her eyes met his with a playful smirk. "Is this a social experiment? You offer me money, and based on my answer, you either toss me a coin or walk away." William blinked. No one had ever spoken to him like that, least of all someone in her situation. She wasn't a beggar. She was something entirely different. His curiosity got the better of him, and before he knew it, he was offering her a deal she couldn't refuse. "Come with me to an event," he said, "and I'll pay you enough to change your life." The woman chuckled softly, not taking him too seriously. "Enough to change my life? Wow. Are you always this dramatic? Or is it just when you're trying to sound like some kind of savior?" There was again her ability to throw him off balance. William wasn't used to being questioned, much less challenged. But her confidence intrigued him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of uncertainty about how things were going to unfold. "Fine," she said after a moment, standing up with a casual shrug. "I'll do it, but only because I'm curious. Let's see how far a man like you is willing to go." As they drove toward the event, William was more aware than ever of this strange woman by his side. She had a presence about her that made him feel something he hadn't felt in years unease. There was no fear or hesitation in her, no aught the luxury she was being swept into. Instead, she appeared utterly unimpressed. William's instinct told him that she was more than just a woman who needed a night out. She was someone who had seen the world's darker side and wasn't interested in any of its glamour. When they arrived at the venue, William knew the night had only just begun. It was a luxurious gala filled with high society, their faces familiar and expectant, as though nothing could faze them. Olivia's wedding was the ultimate social event, and everyone who was anyone had shown up. But when Isabella stepped out of the car with him, she took the room by storm. Her attire was impeccable, and the transformation from the woman he had found on the street to this sophisticated guest was startling. But it wasn't just her appearance that caught everyone's attention. It was her composure, her ease in the spotlight. She wasn't trying to fit in. She was simply herself, strong, self-assured, and completely at ease with who she was. And that was something Olivia, with all her carefully crafted perfection, couldn't help but notice. William noticed the shift in Olivia's demeanor the second their eyes met. The surprise was evident on her face, and then it quickly turned into something darker, resentment, perhaps. William had done exactly what he had set out to do, make Olivia question her decisions. But there was more to this evening than a simple game of one-upmanship. As the night wore on, Isabella, ever the enigma, made herself known not only as William's companion, but as someone who had mastered the art of reading people and situations. She wasn't simply tagging along to satisfy William's revenge. She had her own agenda, one that was far more complex than anyone had expected. Through subtle exchanges with the guests, Isabella revealed more about herself than she intended. William began to realize that she wasn't just a homeless woman he had plucked off the street. She was sharp, intelligent, and more than capable of holding her own in this world of wealth and power. As he watched her interact with others, he could see that she was far more than she appeared. She was a mystery one that he wanted to solve. Later, during the course of the evening, Isabella revealed part of her story. She wasn't always the woman she was now. She had once lived a life of privilege, surrounded by wealth and power, much like the people she was now mingling with. But everything had changed when her family had been betrayed by none other than Olivia herself. The betrayal had ruined Isabella's father, a prominent businessman whose empire had collapsed overnight due to fraudulent schemes Olivia had orchestrated. With nothing left, Isabella had disappeared into the streets, starting a new life under an assumed identity. She had erased every trace of her former existence, leaving behind the world that had once been hers. But now she was back, and she was ready to reclaim what had been taken from her. William, at first only concerned with using Isabella as a pawn to get back at Olivia, found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. Her strength, resilience, and determination to expose the truth about Olivia began to change something within him. He was no longer just interested in her as a tool for revenge. He was beginning to see her as an equal, a woman who had been through hell and back, and yet still stood tall. Together, they devised a plan to bring Olivia down. But the journey was fraught with challenges. Olivia, desperate to protect her secrets, began using every resource she had to block their progress. But Isabella wasn't someone who would be intimidated or silenced. She had fought too hard to get to this point, and she wasn't going to back down now. In the end, it was Isabella who emerged victorious. With William's support, she was able to gather irrefutable evidence of Olivia's involvement in the scandal that had destroyed her family. Olivia's empire of lies came crashing down. She was exposed for the manipulative woman she truly was. But the real victory wasn't in destroying Olivia. It was in Isabella finding the courage to confront her past and rebuild her future. William had helped her in ways she never thought possible. But more than that, he had shown her that love wasn't about power or control. It was about trust, respect, and vulnerability. As the story concluded, William realized that he had finally found someone who made him a better person. Isabella had shown him that there was more to life than wealth and status. And together, they would build something far more meaningful, a future that was built on love, trust, and the lessons they had learned from their pasts. A millionaire CEO's surprising love story. The unexpected woman who changed everything at first glance. William Lancaster seemed to have everything. As a millionaire CEO of a successful tech company, he had wealth, influence, and access to a world few could even dream of. His life was a series of luxurious events, high-profile meetings, and boardroom decisions. But despite his material success, something was missing. Deep inside, he was haunted by the memory of a painful breakup with Olivia, his ex-fiancée. The woman who once meant everything to him had left him for someone else, leaving William to deal with the sting of rejection and betrayal. As the years passed, William buried his emotions in work, crafting a persona of confidence and control. He became the embodiment of business success, but inside, there was an emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. He had avoided thinking about Olivia for a long time, but when an unexpected wedding invitation arrived, everything changed. Olivia, the woman who had broken his heart, was getting married, and she wanted him to attend. William's immediate reaction was anger. How could she invite him now, after everything that had happened? It was as if she was trying to rub salt in the wound. Yet, beneath that anger, William couldn't deny that a part of him wanted to show up, to prove that he had moved on and was better off without her. But attending alone, with nothing to show for all his success, felt like a failure. He needed a plan, something that would make a statement. His solution came unexpectedly one day when he was leaving the office. As he walked down the street, his eyes caught sight of a young woman sitting on the sidewalk outside a restaurant. She appeared out of place, her clothes were tattered, her hair was messy, and yet there was something captivating about her. She wasn't asking for help, she wasn't pleading for sympathy. Instead, her gaze was sharp and defiant, as if she was in complete control of her situation. On an impulse, William approached her, offering her money. But her response threw him off guard. "Is this a social experiment?" she asked. "You offer me money, and depending on my answer, you either give me a coin or walk away." William was taken aback. Nobody had ever spoken to him like that. She didn't look at him with the usual gratitude or desperation. Instead, she had a sense of boldness that he couldn't ignore. His curiosity piqued. William offered her a deal that would change the course of both of their lives. "Come with me to an event, and I'll pay you enough to change your life." She raised an eyebrow at him. "Enough to change my life? Are you always this dramatic, or is it just when you want to sound like some sort of savior?" William laughed dryly. She was certainly unlike anyone he had ever met. But there was something about her, the way she carried herself, the way she responded to him, that made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. She stood up, dusted off her dress, and looked at him. "Fine, I'll do it, but only because I'm curious. Let's see how far a man like you is willing to go." As the two of them drove toward the event, William couldn't help but notice how completely unaffected she was by her surroundings. Most people in her position would have been in awe of the luxury, but she was calm and collected, as if she belonged there. It fascinated him even more. He didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but he couldn't deny that this woman had an air of mystery about her that intrigued him. When they arrived at the event, the scene was exactly what William had expected: luxurious, elite, and full of powerful figures. But what William hadn't anticipated was how quickly Isabella, the woman he had invited as a plus one, stole the spotlight. As she stepped out of the car beside him, heads turned. The transformation from the woman he had found on the street to a polished, elegant guest was astounding. But it wasn't just her appearance that caught everyone's attention. It was her confidence. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, yet she did so effortlessly. Her poise and calm demeanor made her stand out in a room full of people used to being the center of attention. William couldn't help but watch as Olivia, his ex-fiancée, locked eyes with him. Olivia looked surprised to see him there. But the real shift came when her gaze fell on Isabella. Her expression shifted from shock to subtle discomfort as she took in the presence of this mysterious woman beside William. William knew exactly what he was doing. He had wanted to make Olivia question her choices, and seeing her discomfort was the first victory of the night. As the evening wore on, Isabella proved to be more than just a beautiful companion. She was sharp, engaging, and able to hold her own in a room full of influential people. She seemed unfazed by the questions people asked her, and she responded with an ease that only added to her mystique. William, who had initially seen her as a tool to provoke Olivia, started to see her in a different light. Isabella was not just playing a part. She was a force in her own right, and there was more to her story than she was letting on. Later, she casually revealed a part of her past one that William hadn't expected. She had once lived among the wealthy elite, just like the people at the event. But everything had changed when her family had been ruined by Olivia's actions. Isabella's father had once been a successful businessman, but Olivia had betrayed him, leading to the downfall of his company. The scandal had destroyed Isabella's family, and after the dust had settled, she had been forced to disappear. But now, with a new identity and a desire for revenge, Isabella had returned. She had worked hard to build a new life, and she was determined to expose the truth about Olivia. William couldn't believe it. The woman he had brought to make Olivia jealous had a history with Olivia that went far deeper than he ever imagined. In that moment, William realized that this night was no longer about getting back at Olivia. It was about helping Isabella right the wrongs that had been done to her. As the night continued, William and Isabella made plans to take down Olivia and expose the truth. But this was no easy task. Olivia was a powerful woman, and she would stop at nothing to protect her secrets. The days that followed were filled with tension and strategy. William and Isabella worked together, collecting evidence and making moves behind the scenes. As they grew closer, William found himself drawn to Isabella in ways he hadn't expected. He admired her strength, her resilience, and her intelligence. She was everything Olivia had never been: authentic, determined, and unapologetically herself. As they continued to work together, William began to question everything he had believed about love and relationships. Isabella wasn't just a woman he had picked up off the street. She was someone who had suffered, survived, and fought for what was hers. And now, she was helping him fight for what he wanted: justice for the woman he had once loved and redemption for the past that had held him captive for so long. Eventually, the truth came to light. With the evidence they had gathered, Olivia was exposed for her role in destroying Isabella's family. The media erupted with stories about the scandal, and Olivia's empire came crashing down. The powerful woman who had once controlled so much of the high society world was now just another fallen figure in a world of power and greed. For Isabella, the victory wasn't just in seeing Olivia's downfall, it was in reclaiming her life, her future, and her independence. But as the story came to a close, William realized that there was more to their connection than just a shared goal of revenge. He had fallen for Isabella, not because of her beauty or intelligence, but because of her ability to challenge him, to make him a better person. In her, he found someone who wasn't afraid to stand up to him, and in that he discovered a love that was real, raw, and transformative. As the story ended, William understood that his life would never be the same. He had started this journey with the intention of making Olivia regret leaving him, but he had ended up with something far more valuable: a love that had changed him forever. The Millionaire CEO's unexpected proposal. From betrayal to true love, William Lancaster was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and status. As the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, he had built a life surrounded by luxury, high-end events, and the admiration of others. Yet, despite all his achievements, there was one thing that he could not escape: the painful memory of his broken engagement with Olivia, his ex-fiancée. She had left him for someone else, and the betrayal still stung, even after years had passed. For William, it seemed like he could never truly let go. But life has a way of surprising us, and sometimes the very things we try to avoid find a way of forcing themselves into our reality. When Olivia sent him an invitation to her wedding years after their painful breakup, William's first reaction was fury. How could she send him an invitation after everything that had happened between them? It felt like a slap in the face, a reminder of the past that he had long tried to forget. The more William thought about the invitation, the more he became determined to attend. He wasn't going to show up alone and vulnerable. No, this time, he would prove to Olivia that he had moved on, that he was better off without her. But showing up by himself was not the way to make a statement. He needed to make an impact, to show Olivia that he had risen above her betrayal. He needed to show her that he could thrive, even without her. Later that day, William was leaving the office when his eyes fell on a young woman sitting on the sidewalk in front of a restaurant. She was dirty, her clothes worn and torn, yet there was something about her that intrigued him. Her messy hair framed her face, and her eyes held a certain defiance: no pleading, no sadness, just an unspoken strength. She wasn't asking for charity, but instead seemed to hold herself with a dignity that William couldn't ignore. Without thinking, he approached her. "Need some money?" he asked, slipping his hands into his pockets. The woman's gaze lifted to meet his, and for a moment, William thought she would look at him with gratitude, as most people did when they were offered help. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at him with sharp eyes, almost sizing him up, before asking with a sarcastic smile, "Is this a social experiment? You offer me money, and depending on my answer, you either toss me a coin or walk away." Taken aback, William blinked. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. He was used to being treated with respect, with gratitude, but this woman wasn't intimidated by him. Her defiance was something he found oddly refreshing. "Come with me to an event, and I'll pay you enough to change your life," he said impulsively, figuring that the offer would catch her interest. The woman laughed softly, shaking her head. Enough to change my life? Wow. Do you always use dramatic lines? Or is it just when you want to sound like some kind of savior? William's eyebrows furrowed, and he found himself intrigued by her sharpness. He was used to people being impressed by his wealth, but she wasn't even fazed by his offer. Yet, for some reason, he didn't want to back down. I can find someone else if you don't want to do it. She stood up, dusting off her dress as she closed the distance between them. I'll accept, she said, but only because I'm curious. Let's see how far a man like you is willing to go. She had him there. William felt an inexplicable desire to prove himself to her, to show her that he wasn't just any rich guy who liked to throw money around. There was something about her that stirred something inside him. As they made their way to the event, William couldn't help but notice how calm she remained. Isabella, as she introduced herself, wasn't nervous or in awe of her surroundings. She was completely composed, as if she belonged to the world of high society, an unfamiliar place for someone who had been living on the streets. She wasn't dazzled by the luxury of the car, the lavish salon they visited for a makeover, or the glittering event they attended. She was an enigma, one that William couldn't figure out. But when they arrived at the banquet hall, it was clear that she was more than just a beautiful woman. As they walked down the red carpet, heads turned, whispers filled the air. People were trying to figure out who she was. William was used to being the center of attention, but for the first time, he found himself in the shadow of the woman walking beside him. Isabella carried herself with an undeniable poise and confidence, and it was obvious that she wasn't fazed by the attention. The evening took a surprising turn when they encountered Olivia, his ex-fiancée. William had expected some sort of emotional confrontation, but what he didn't anticipate was how unsettled Olivia became when she saw Isabella. Her eyes shifted between William and Isabella, her discomfort palpable. The night was supposed to be about making Olivia jealous, but William couldn't help but notice how much attention Isabella was commanding. She wasn't just standing by his side, she was a force of nature. And as the night went on, William realized that Isabella wasn't the decorative arm candy he had imagined. She was sharp, intelligent, and completely in control of her surroundings. At one point during the evening, Isabella casually mentioned how she had once lived in the world of the elite, just like the people at this event, but had lost everything due to a betrayal by none other than Olivia herself. Isabella's father had once been a successful businessman, but after trusting Olivia and her family, he had been ruined. The scandal that followed had destroyed Isabella's family, and after losing everything, she had disappeared from the public eye. Now, years later, Isabella had returned not as a woman seeking revenge, but as someone who had fought to rebuild her life. And her plan was simple: expose Olivia for the fraud she was. William was stunned. He had never expected that the woman he had invited to make Olivia jealous had a personal vendetta against her. But the more he heard, the more he realized that Isabella wasn't just someone looking for revenge. She was someone who had suffered, someone who had fought and survived. She wasn't just a casualty of Olivia's schemes, she was a force to be reckoned with. As the evening unfolded, William and Isabella worked together in secret, gathering evidence and making plans to bring Olivia down. And as they spent more time together, William found himself drawn to Isabella in ways he hadn't expected. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. She didn't fawn over him or look up to him because of his wealth. She challenged him, pushed him to be better, and showed him that there was more to life than just business deals and financial success. With each passing day, William began to fall for Isabella. He admired her strength, her intelligence, and her unwavering determination. But he also realized that he was falling for her in ways he hadn't planned. What started as a scheme to make Olivia jealous had turned into something much deeper, a genuine connection with a woman who had once been a stranger, and now seemed to be the one person who truly understood him. The plan to expose Olivia eventually came to fruition. With all the evidence they had gathered, Isabella was able to reveal the truth about Olivia's betrayal and the scandal that had destroyed her family. The media exploded with the story, and Olivia's once powerful empire began to crumble. She had spent years manipulating the world around her, but in the end, it was her own lies that brought her down. For Isabella, the victory wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life and taking control of her future. She had spent years fighting against the world, against betrayal, and against the people who had wronged her. But now, with William by her side, she was finally free. The bond between William and Isabella grew stronger as they worked together to expose Olivia. But what neither of them anticipated was that their relationship would evolve into something far deeper than either had expected. In the end, it wasn't just about defeating Olivia, it was about the love that had unexpectedly blossomed between two people who, at first, seemed so different. As they stood together, watching Olivia's downfall unfold, William realized that Isabella had changed his life. He had started out this journey seeking revenge, but he had found love. He had started out thinking he was in control, but in the end, it was Isabella who had taught him what truly mattered. A millionaire CEO's unexpected journey to love. The story of redemption and transformation. William Lancaster had it all: wealth, power, influence. As the CEO of a billion-dollar company, he was a man who had spent his life building an empire, living in a world of opulence and luxury. There was no problem he couldn't solve, no challenge he couldn't face. Yet, despite all his success, there was a lingering pain that no amount of money or accolades could erase: the betrayal by his former fiancée, Olivia Harrington. Their love had once seemed perfect, but in the end, Olivia had left William for another man. The memory of that betrayal haunted him, leaving a scar that never quite healed. But William, being the man he was, channeled that pain into his work. He buried himself in his business, distancing himself from emotions and relationships. After all, who needed love when you had everything else? That is, until one fateful day when Olivia sent him an invitation to her wedding. The woman who had shattered his heart now expected him to celebrate her happiness. William was furious, but more than that, he felt a sense of pride. He wasn't going to let her think that her marriage was a victory over him. He would go to the wedding, but he wasn't going alone. He needed to show Olivia that he had moved on, that he was better than her, stronger, and more successful. As he sat in his office, staring at the invitation, an idea struck him. He needed to make an impact, to make Olivia feel a sense of jealousy and regret. But he didn't want to show up with just any date. He wanted someone who could truly make an impression, someone who could leave Olivia wondering what she had lost. And that's when he saw her, outside his office building, sitting on the sidewalk with a young woman. Her clothes were worn and dirty, and her hair was a tangled mess. Yet there was something striking about her. Despite her appearance, she held herself with a quiet dignity, and her eyes, sharp and defiant, spoke volumes. She wasn't begging for anything. Instead, she seemed to be sizing up the world around her. William couldn't look away. He approached her, his steps deliberate. "Need money?" he asked, his tone neutral, but with a hint of curiosity. The woman didn't immediately respond. Instead, she looked at him with an unreadable expression. There was no gratitude in her gaze, no sense of desperation. She seemed to be analyzing him, and it unsettled William in a way he couldn't explain. "Is this a social experiment?" she finally asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You offer me money, and depending on my answer, you either toss me a coin or walk away?" William was taken aback. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. He was used to being admired, treated with respect, yet this woman wasn't impressed by him at all. She didn't even seem to care. Her words struck a chord in him. "Come with me to an event. I'll pay you enough to change your life," he said, trying to offer something compelling. She tilted her head, her eyes flickering with amusement. "Enough to change my life? Really? What is this, some kind of movie script?" William found himself intrigued. She wasn't just asking for help or charity, she was challenging him. He liked that. And so, on impulse, he added, "I'll pay you a lot. You'll walk into that event with me, and when it's over, your life will be completely different." She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Sure, and I'll bet this will be the start of a fairy tale, right?" She stood up slowly, brushing off her clothes and stepping closer to him. "I'll take you up on that offer, but only because I'm curious. Let's see how far a man like you is willing to go." William couldn't resist. There was something about this woman, her defiance, her strength that captivated him. He wasn't sure where this would lead, but he knew one thing. It was going to be interesting. The night of the event arrived, and William found himself in the back of a sleek car with a woman, now named Isabella, sitting beside him. She wasn't nervous or impressed by her surroundings. On the contrary, she seemed entirely at ease, as if she had belonged in this world all along. William had expected her to be awestruck by the luxury, but she was unfazed. She didn't even ask where they were going, a quiet confidence radiating from her as they drove through the city. When they arrived at the venue, a grand banquet hall, where hundreds of wealthy socialites were gathered, William noticed that Isabella still wasn't fazed by the opulence. As they entered, all eyes turned toward them. William was used to being the center of attention, but tonight, it was Isabella who commanded it. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was more than that. It was the way she carried herself, the quiet strength in her posture, the way she held her chin high as if she had been in this world before. People whispered among themselves, trying to figure out who she was. William had expected some jealousy from Olivia, his ex-fiancée, but he hadn't expected Isabella to cause such a stir. Olivia, dressed in her pristine wedding gown, noticed them almost immediately. Her gaze flickered from William to Isabella, and in that moment, William saw something he hadn't expected: discomfort. Olivia was unsettled, and William felt a sense of triumph. He wasn't just showing up with a beautiful woman, he had made Olivia feel something she hadn't planned for. Isabella's composure only seemed to deepen Olivia's discomfort. As the evening wore on, Isabella's calm and assured demeanor continued to make an impact. She wasn't just another date on William's arm. She was someone who was holding her own in a world that wasn't hers to begin with. The evening took another unexpected turn when Isabella casually revealed that her family had once been part of this elite world, a world that had been torn apart by betrayal. She shared how her father, a successful businessman, had trusted Olivia and her family with a partnership that ultimately destroyed him. Isabella's father had been accused of financial fraud, and the scandal that followed had ruined their lives. Olivia had played a role in that downfall, and Isabella had been forced to fight to survive on the streets after losing everything. As she spoke, William was shocked. This wasn't just some random woman who had come to an event to make his ex jealous. This was a woman with a deep, personal vendetta. But as much as she wanted revenge, it was clear that Isabella wasn't here for that. She wasn't driven by hatred or anger. She was here because she had a score to settle, one that involved Olivia. As the night progressed, William found himself increasingly drawn to Isabella. She wasn't like the women he was used to, those who were impressed by his wealth or status. She challenged him, she intrigued him, and she made him question everything he thought he knew about life and love. Isabella wasn't just a pawn in his plan to make Olivia jealous. She was becoming someone he truly admired, someone he didn't want to let go. In the days that followed, as the plan to expose Olivia's betrayal unfolded, William realized that he was beginning to fall for Isabella. But more than that, he was beginning to see her as a partner, someone who wasn't just fighting for revenge, but for a future. William had spent his life building a business empire, but Isabella had spent hers fighting to survive. Now, he was starting to understand her resilience, her strength, and the kind of person she was. She wasn't just some random woman, she was the kind of woman who could bring him to his knees. And as the final pieces of Olivia's deceit fell into place, William found himself standing by Isabella's side, not as a CEO trying to protect his reputation, but as a man who was finally allowing himself to feel. He didn't need to hide behind his wealth or his status anymore. With Isabella, he didn't need to be perfect, he just needed to be himself. The scandal that followed Olivia's exposure was swift and unforgiving. Her financial empire crumbled, and her reputation was destroyed. William had gotten what he wanted, but in the process, he had gained something he hadn't expected: love. For Isabella, the victory wasn't just about exposing Olivia, it was about reclaiming her life and her future. She wasn't just a victim of betrayal and scandal anymore. She was a woman who had fought for what was rightfully hers. And now, standing by William's side, she knew that her story was far from over. The love between William and Isabella had transformed them both. They had started this journey as two people trying to outsmart their past, but they ended it as two people who had found something far more valuable than revenge: a deep, undeniable connection. Their journey wasn't just about winning, it was about building a future together. As the months passed, Isabella and William's bond only grew stronger. William had once been a man who thought he needed to control everything, but Isabella had shown him that some things, like love, were meant to be shared, not controlled. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to let go of control. Their love was a reminder that life isn't about the battles you win or the wealth you accumulate. It's about the people who stand by your side when everything else falls apart. Together, William and Isabella had found a love that was real, one that was built on trust, respect, and a shared understanding of the pain and joy that life brings. A millionaire CEO's unexpected change. How one woman's challenge transformed his life in the high-powered world of business, where everything is meticulously calculated and every decision is driven by profit and strategy. There is little room for vulnerability or personal connections. William Lancaster, a self-made millionaire and the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, had built his life around these principles. He wasn't just wealthy, he was respected, admired, and feared. Yet, despite his success and the luxuries that came with it, there was a part of him that always seemed unfulfilled. The year before, William had been engaged to Olivia Harrington, a woman from an equally powerful family. Their relationship had seemed like the perfect match, a union of two empires. However, Olivia's ambition and cold-heartedness had shattered the illusion of their perfect life together. Olivia had betrayed William in a way that stung more than any business loss he had ever endured. She left him for another man, one with more social influence, and cut all ties with him without a second thought. For William, the betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a blow to his pride. He didn't know how to process the loss. His typical way of dealing with discomfort was to bury himself in work. He didn't need love, he told himself. After all, he had everything else: a thriving business, luxury cars, a mansion, and the adoration of his employees. What more could a man want? But that mindset started to shift when Olivia sent him an invitation to her wedding. It wasn't just a casual invite. It was a slap in the face, a reminder of the life they could have had. William's initial reaction was to toss the invitation aside. He didn't want to show up to her wedding, not as a broken man who had been left behind. No, he was going to show her that he was still on top, still powerful, still the man everyone admired. Yet, as he sat alone in his office, contemplating the situation, something inside him stirred. He couldn't just show up to the wedding without making an impact. Olivia was marrying a man who seemed to embody everything she valued: wealth, status, and family ties. But William was determined to show up with someone who would steal the spotlight, someone who would make Olivia realize that she had made a mistake. That's when he saw her. Outside his office building, he noticed a young woman sitting on the curb. She was dressed in ragged clothes, her hair messy and unkempt, and she seemed to be waiting for something or someone. Her eyes were sharp, full of defiance, not the look of a woman who was desperate for help, but someone who had seen the harsh realities of life and wasn't afraid of them. William, intrigued by her calm presence despite her appearance, approached her. "Do you need money?" he asked, as if offering a simple solution to whatever her problems might be. The woman didn't immediately answer. She looked up at him with a piercing gaze, weighing him as if he were just another part of the scenery. "Is this a social experiment?" she asked, sarcasm dripping from her voice. "You offer me money, and depending on my response, you'll either walk away or toss me a coin?" William was taken aback by her bluntness. She wasn't like the women he was used to, those who fawned over his wealth and status. This woman was different. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, and that intrigued him. "Come with me to an event. I'll pay you enough to change your life," he said, trying a different approach, more confident now. She smirked. "Enough to change my life? What's this, a movie? You're going to give me a happy ending if I just play along." Her challenge intrigued him even further. "I'll pay you well. You'll have all the freedom you want once the night's over. Just come with me and act like a normal person for a few hours. The woman, without hesitation, stood up, brushing off her clothes. Fine, I'll do it, but only because I'm curious. Let's see how far you're willing to go. In that moment, William realized he wasn't just offering money to a stranger, he was stepping into something he couldn't control. But that's exactly what made him want to push forward. This woman had already figured him out. She was no ordinary woman, and he had to know more. The night of the event arrived, and William found himself in the back of a sleek car with a woman now introduced as Isabella sitting beside him. She didn't ask where they were going, nor did she seem interested in the luxurious surroundings. She was calm, collected, and unbothered by the wealth and extravagance around her. It was as if she belonged to this world, despite her appearance. When they arrived at the venue, a grand banquet hall with hundreds of wealthy guests mingling, it was clear that Isabella's presence was something different. As they entered, heads turned. Women whispered among themselves, trying to figure out who she was, and men looked at her with interest. Isabella didn't seem to mind the attention. In fact, she acted as if it were a normal part of her life. William felt a slight sense of pride as he walked beside her. She wasn't just an accessory to his ego, she was a statement. She was challenging the very thing that had once left him broken. But Olivia's reaction to Isabella's presence was even more telling. As soon as Olivia caught sight of them, her expression changed. She was startled, unsure of how to respond. William, sensing his ex-fiancée's discomfort, moved toward her. Olivia, he greeted her with a polite yet cold tone. Olivia's gaze quickly shifted to Isabella, her eyes narrowing as if trying to place where she knew her from. Isabella extended her hand confidently. Isabella, it's a pleasure to meet you. The two women exchanged pleasantries, but the tension in the air was palpable. Olivia was visibly rattled, and William couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. Isabella wasn't just playing along, she was making an impact, and it was clear that Olivia was uncomfortable. As the evening progressed, Isabella revealed her backstory. She spoke of how her father, a once successful businessman, had been betrayed by Olivia's family. Olivia's manipulation of her father had led to the downfall of his empire, and Isabella had lost everything. She had fought tooth and nail to survive on the streets after the scandal destroyed her life. William listened, shocked by the gravity of what Isabella was saying. He had known that Olivia was ruthless in her pursuit of power, but hearing about the consequences of her actions from someone who had lived through it was eye-opening. Isabella wasn't just a woman seeking revenge. She was a woman who had fought through unimaginable hardship and had come out stronger for it. The night continued, but William couldn't shake the feeling that his world had just been turned upside down. He had invited Isabella to make a statement, but she had made him see things in a new light. She wasn't just a beautiful woman, she was someone who had the strength to stand up for herself, to fight against the forces that sought to destroy her. As the evening came to a close, Isabella turned to William with a calm smile. "It's done. You wanted to make an impact, and you did," she said, her voice steady and self-assured. William, still processing everything that had happened, nodded. "I didn't expect this." "I didn't expect you either," Isabella replied, her eyes meeting his with a knowing look. What had begun as a scheme to make Olivia feel the sting of regret had transformed into something much more profound. William wasn't just playing a game anymore. He was beginning to see Isabella as more than just a pawn. She had challenged him, pushed him to question everything he thought he knew about power and success. And in doing so, she had opened his eyes to a world he had been too blind to see before. As the night ended, William realized that his life was about to change in ways he could never have predicted. And in that moment, standing beside Isabella, he knew that he wasn't the same man who had walked into the event hours before. Something deep inside him had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to let himself feel. A Millionaire CEO's redemption, a journey of love, revenge, and self-discovery. In the world of high-stakes business, William Lancaster had built a life many envied. As the CEO of a successful tech empire, he had everything he could ever want: wealth, power, respect, and status. His success was unparalleled, and his empire was a symbol of dominance in the business world. Yet, despite the glittering facade, something was missing. He was alone. William's life had once been intertwined with Olivia Harrington, his fiancée, a woman from a prestigious family who shared his ambition and hunger for success. Their engagement had been seen as a merger of two powerful families, destined for greatness. But Olivia's betrayal shattered this illusion of a perfect future. She had left him for another man, a powerful businessman who could offer her the kind of social clout Olivia desired, leaving William to pick up the pieces of his broken heart and pride. Olivia's sudden departure left William reeling, his confidence shaken for the first time in his life. In the aftermath of their split, he threw himself into work, distancing himself from personal connections. He told himself that business was all that mattered, relationships were nothing more than distractions. But that all changed when Olivia invited him to her wedding. The invitation felt like a slap in the face. Olivia, seemingly oblivious to the hurt she had caused, was moving on with her life, marrying a man who embodied everything she valued: wealth, status, and family connections. William was determined to show her that he had moved on too. But he didn't just want to attend the wedding, he wanted to make a statement. He needed to show Olivia that he was still the man she had once loved and lost. That's when he saw her. As he left his office one afternoon, still brooding over the invitation, William spotted a young woman sitting alone on the sidewalk outside a restaurant. She was dirty, her clothes worn, and her hair disheveled. But there was something about her, something fierce in her eyes, that caught his attention. This wasn't the usual beggar or down-on-their-luck person he was used to seeing. Her gaze wasn't one of desperation, but of defiance. Intrigued, William walked up to her, hands in his pockets. "Do you need money?" he asked, offering her a hand. The woman looked at him for a moment, sizing him up. "Is this a social experiment?" she asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "You give me money, and depending on my response, you either walk away or toss me a coin?" William blinked in surprise. No one had ever spoken to him like this. He had the power to control situations, to make people comply. But this woman wasn't intimidated by his wealth or position. He wasn't used to this kind of challenge. "You need a job?" he asked. "Come with me to an event. I'll pay you enough to change your life." The woman studied him, and a smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. "Enough to change my life? Wow, do you always use such dramatic lines?" William felt a surge of frustration. He was trying to be generous, offering a solution, and she was mocking him. But there was something else, something about her attitude made him want to keep engaging, to see how far she would push him. "Just come with me. Smile, wear a nice dress, and act like a normal person for one night. That's all I ask," he said, trying to regain control of the situation. She stood up, brushing off her dress. "Fine," she said. "I'll go. But only because I'm curious to see how far a man like you is willing to go." And just like that, she agreed. William didn't understand why, but he felt something shift inside him. This was no longer just a favor he was offering. This was a test, a game, and he was going to play it to win. Later that night, the woman who introduced herself as Isabella joined him at a luxury salon, where he instructed the staff to give her a complete makeover. He watched in silence as they worked their magic, transforming her into someone who could hold her own in the world of high society. The woman who had first caught his attention for her raw defiance was now poised, elegant, and utterly captivating. But what surprised William the most was Isabella's calmness. Despite the lavish surroundings, she didn't seem impressed. In fact, she appeared unfazed by the transformation, as if she had been here before. When she stepped out of the salon, William couldn't help but stare. She looked nothing like the woman he had found on the street. But more than her appearance, it was the way she carried herself that intrigued him. She wasn't intimidated by the event. She wasn't trying to fit in. She was simply herself, unbothered, confident, and powerful. As they entered the wedding venue, it didn't take long for all eyes to turn to them. People whispered, men stared, and women looked on with envy. Isabella moved through the crowd with grace, never breaking her composure. William could feel his ex-fiancée's eyes on them. When Olivia caught sight of them, her expression shifted. She was surprised to see William there, and even more surprised to see who he had brought with him. William approached Olivia, his tone polite but cool. "Olivia," he greeted her. "I thought I'd show up. You didn't expect me, did you?" Olivia's gaze flicked over to Isabella, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "We haven't met," Olivia said, trying to hide her unease. Isabella, without missing a beat, extended her hand. "Isabella, a pleasure to meet you," she said, her voice steady and confident. The tension was palpable. Olivia was clearly unsettled, and William couldn't help but feel a small victory. Isabella wasn't just a pawn in his game, she was playing her own. As the evening wore on, Isabella revealed the truth of her past. She wasn't just a woman who had been down on her luck. She was the daughter of a successful businessman whose life had been ruined by Olivia's family. Olivia's manipulations had led to the downfall of her father's company, and Isabella had lost everything: her home, her family, and her future. William listened, stunned by the depth of the story. He had known that Olivia had a ruthless streak, but hearing the consequences of her actions from someone who had lived through it was a wake-up call. Isabella wasn't just a woman seeking revenge. She was a survivor. As the night ended, Isabella turned to William. "You want to make an impact," she said. "And you did. Now let's go." William, still processing everything he had learned, nodded. He had come to the event to get back at Olivia, but in doing so, he had discovered something far more important. Isabella had changed the way he saw everything. As they left the venue, William realized that he was no longer the man who had walked in. His life was beginning to shift in ways he hadn't anticipated, and for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what that meant. In life, we often face moments that challenge us in unexpected ways, particularly when it comes to trust, betrayal, and our capacity for change. William Lancaster's journey in the story reflects this universal human experience, showing that even those who appear to have everything: wealth, power, and success are not immune to life's deeper struggles. His story teaches us that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are those we least expect, but these experiences can serve as catalysts for personal growth. For the elderly, who may have witnessed or experienced their own losses, betrayals, or disappointments over the years, the message is clear. It's never too late to reevaluate the direction of your life and seek redemption. Whether it's mending old wounds or letting go of past mistakes, there is always an opportunity for change, healing, and renewal. William's transformation demonstrates that true success isn't just about material wealth or social status. It is about understanding and embracing the complexities of human emotions and relationships. After years of living a life centered on ambition and revenge, William learns that love, vulnerability, and genuine connection are what bring lasting fulfillment. His journey towards emotional awakening mirrors what many elderly people may feel after a lifetime of prioritizing work, duty, or social expectations over personal happiness or emotional well-being. The key takeaway for older generations is that it's never too late to open your heart, forgive, and allow yourself to experience love and joy again, even if it comes unexpectedly or with challenges. Moreover, Isabella's story shows that no matter how difficult life becomes, it's possible to rise again, even from the most desperate situations. Her resilience, despite losing everything, reflects an important lesson for anyone who has faced hardships in their later years. Survival and personal growth are not only about enduring life's difficulties, but also about finding meaning and purpose in them. It's easy to become discouraged as we age, especially when faced with illness, the loss of loved ones, or the physical challenges that come with getting older. But like Isabella, who found strength in her past pain, the elderly can take pride in their resilience and use their life experiences to inspire others. Life isn't always about avoiding pain or sorrow. It's about how we choose to rise and continue moving forward with strength and dignity. Another important lesson from the story is the significance of authenticity. Throughout the narrative, Isabella remains true to herself, never pretending to be someone she's not, even in the face of adversity. This authenticity allows her to navigate the complex world of high society, despite her difficult past. The elderly can relate to this lesson, especially after having lived a lifetime full of varied experiences. There is power in being yourself and embracing your story. The world often tells us that we must fit a certain mold, but the most fulfilling lives come from accepting who we are, regardless of age. As we age, it becomes even more crucial to live with authenticity and to pass on this message to younger generations. Aging is not about becoming irrelevant or fading away. It is about sharing your wisdom, your unique perspective, and your story with others, showing that life can still be rich, fulfilling, and meaningful at any age. The story also highlights the importance of self-worth and the courage to stand up for oneself. Isabella's refusal to be intimidated or treated as inferior by the men she encounters, including William, is a powerful reminder that we are all deserving of respect and dignity, no matter our past or our circumstances. For older individuals who may have felt overlooked or dismissed by society, this message is especially important. It reminds them that their voices, their needs, and their experiences matter. It's essential to stand firm in one's beliefs and never settle for less than what you deserve, whether it's in personal relationships, in the workplace, or in society at large. This courage to assert oneself becomes even more vital as we age and face the realities of growing older, but the lesson remains the same. Our worth is inherent, and no one can take that away. Lastly, the narrative encourages us to understand that love, in its many forms, has the power to heal. William's gradual realization of his feelings for Isabella and his willingness to let go of his past grudges is a testament to the transformative power of love. For the elderly, who may have experienced long-term relationships, the loss of a spouse, or the complexities of family dynamics, the idea that love is both a force for change and healing is significant. Love doesn't just refer to romantic relationships, it extends to friendships, family, and even self-love. As we age, the capacity for love only grows stronger, and it is never too late to cultivate and cherish these bonds. The ability to love and be loved is a gift that enriches our lives, and we should never underestimate the profound impact it can have on our well-being. In conclusion, the story of William and Isabella offers us invaluable insights into life, love, resilience, and the importance of staying true to oneself. It reminds us that, regardless of age or circumstance, we have the power to change our lives, heal our wounds, and embrace the potential for new beginnings. For older individuals, the key messages are clear. It's never too late to experience love, to be your authentic self, to stand up for what you deserve, and to cherish the relationships that matter most. Life may present challenges, but with the right mindset, it's possible to face them with strength, dignity, and the hope for a brighter future. Thank you for watching this video. We hope it inspired you on your own journey of rebuilding life. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel Stories TH for more empowering stories and tips. See you in the next video.